Good evening, candidates and audience members. Thank you for attending the League of Women Voters of Santa Fe County's Candidate Forum for the contested primary race for Secretary of State. I am Sarah Schlanger, and I will be the moderator. For the first time in New Mexico history, legislation has been passed allowing independent and declined to state voters to participate in primary elections without changing their registration. Information on our semi-open primary legislation is available at our entrance table or at our website, lwvsfc.org. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Santa Fe County, I want to express our gratitude to the Santa Fe New Mexican for broadcasting our candidate forums this year as a service to our community. And I want to give special thanks to Bill Church, who couldn't be here tonight. It's a very busy primary season. The League has also had the great good fortune to work with the Food Depot, whose amazing staff has made this venue available for 3 of our 4 candidate forums this primary season. We're in our home away from home. The Food Depot's executive director, Jill Dixon, is here tonight, and I'd like to ask her to say a few words.
I got smart tonight and I'm wearing sneakers instead of heels. So thank you all for being here. I'm seeing some familiar faces and some new faces tonight. I'm Jill Dixon. I'm the executive director of the Food Depot. We've been around this joint for about 14 years now. It's so amazing to watch the democratic process unfold. And at the Food Depot, we say that hunger is a policy choice. And we feel incredibly fortunate to live in a state where our state legislature, our governor, our city and local municipalities have chosen to make a policy choice of abundance in relationship to food access for New Mexicans. We may have a really high incidence of food insecurity, but we also have a very active community that works every single day to step forward and say, we'll take care of you, and to help people help themselves. I know that many of you out there in the audience are part of that, whether it's as volunteers or as donors, and we're really grateful that we get to host tonight so you can sit inside our mission and sort of passively absorb and create some questions about what it is we're doing here. So as you stare around a little bit and you wonder, why does that pallet say Cerrillos on it? Or why is there dog food over there? We want you to book a tour with us and come on in to learn more about the work that we do. You can always visit us at thefooddepot.org. There are staff peppered all over the building tonight. We'd be happy to arrange something with you and help you find a way to become more deeply involved in our work. But thank you so much for being active community members. We're grateful that you're here.
Thank you, Jill. As you all know, the League is committed to civil discourse. Our candidates will be following League protocols for these forums, including respecting the time limits for their responses, and Mary will help, and not engaging in crosstalk, please, and being mutually respectful, courteous, constructive, and orderly, even when you disagree. The questions that we'll be asking have been selected by our screening panel to focus on issues that seem to generate the most interest at this time. Questions that are similar have been consolidated, and questions that are directed to one candidate or that may contain a personal attack, we have been eliminating those. Due to time constraints, not all questions can be asked, and we invite you to stay after the forum to talk to the candidates, although they may have other things they need to do tonight. So we'll wrap up as quickly as we can shortly before 5 o'clock to give you a chance to talk. If you haven't already submitted questions, you can email them to lwvsfc@gmail.com now or at any time during the forum. If you're here in person, you've been asked probably 5 times if you want to ask a question, and you've filled out a 3x5 card. If you still have questions, hand them down the aisles to our runners, please. Our timekeeper, as we've heard from Henry, Mary Shrubin, is sitting in the front. When the candidate has 30 seconds left, she will hold up a yellow warning sign. That is, Mary will, not the candidate. And when her time is up, Mary will hold up the red stop sign. At that point, we're going to ask that you wind things up. As Henry said, you can finish your sentence, but no semicolons or run-ons, please. If not, I'm going to interrupt, and I don't think I'll have to do that out of fairness to everybody. In the interest of time here tonight, let's save our applause till the end of the forum. Thank you. Before I introduce the candidates, let me just paraphrase the duties of the Secretary of State. The New Mexico Secretary of State is the state's chief elections officer, overseeing secure elections, regulating lobbyists, filing campaign finance reports, and managing business registrations. In addition, they maintain official state records, act as the keeper of the state seal, serve as the state government ethics regulator, and they are third in the line of gubernatorial succession, or second if you count the governor as first. We're going to begin with 2-minute opening statements by our candidates and conclude with 1-minute closing statements. We're very fortunate to have 2 candidates here tonight who are both currently serving as county clerks in their respective counties. We have Catherine Clark from Santa Fe County and Amanda Lopez Askin from Doña Ana County. We're going to start with the opening statement from Catherine Clark.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for having us here to talk about the Secretary of State's office. I'm Catherine Clark. I'm the 2-term county clerk from Santa Fe, running for Secretary of State. If you don't know about me, I am a military brat. My dad did 22 years in the Air Force. We moved around a lot. My parents really believed in hard work and making sure that we had everything we needed. I'm a 5th generation union member, so I'm very proud to have endorsements from AFSCME and sheet metal workers. And I'm very proud to work for this county. We have some of the best elections in the country. We've won 13 national awards. We're #1 for turnout for large counties. We have pushed innovative policy and procedures at the Secretary of State's office, and coming on Tuesday, we'll be the only county protected from federal agents, armed federal agents such as ICE, because I had the wherewithal to send a letter to ICE before the legislation known as SB 264 is going to take effect. You know, I think this election is really, really about our vision and what we plan to do for voters, but it's also about this administration at the presidential level really going through executive overreach, attempting to impact our elections. We also have seen the Supreme Court now, diminishing our rights to have voting rights, right? We just saw an overturning of our ability to contradict, especially along racial segregation lines. So these issues are real, and the Secretary of State will need to stand strong. They'll take office January 1st, 2027, and need to be ready in about 8 months to run a presidential primary. So there are a lot of issues. I'm looking forward to speaking with my opponent about them and learning a little bit about our visions for the office. But I'm Catherine Clark. I'm the county clerk from Santa Fe, cat mom, and really hoping to, earn your vote today. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Amanda Askin. Thank you, Amanda.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Amanda Lopez Askin, candidate for Secretary of State. Thank you all for taking time out today to be here with us today. I wanted to give you a little bio on myself and how I ended up right here. I was born and raised in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and am very proud to be from the heart of the borderlands. Like many New Mexicans, I grew up with challenges that included food insecurity, housing insecurity, pretty extreme poverty during some times. But what I did have was an amazing advocate and mother, and she made all the difference in the world. She raised me to believe that I could do anything, that opportunities were out there for me to have, and that I deserved a seat at any table I wanted to be at. And so I always want to frame what I didn't have with what I did have. And so I always say I won the mom lottery, and that will continue to be true. I grew up in the library. That was often my babysitter. It basically opened up another world for me, and I really developed a lifelong love for education, learning, and understanding. And I was a first-generation college student. I actually earned my bachelor's, my master's, and my PhD at New Mexico State University. Go Aggies, sorry. And also while serving on the Board of Regents at New Mexico State. I spent the first part of my career working with young people in foster care, And that was really important to my lived experience. But now I work in elections. And as an election administrator, one of the things that is really, really important for you to know is I have been there for 8 years. I have run 12 elections in the second most populous county in our state with the most contentious elections. It is always hard, but it is always worth it. I've run elections during the 2018 Xochitl Torres Small Yvette Harrell, and all of the elections I've had since then, we've had to fight to make sure that they were run well. And I'm proud to say that I am the clerk in Doña Ana County, and happy to talk today more about that. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the first question, and we'll be starting with Catherine Clark again. And this is a 2-minute question.
Okay.
What challenges do you foresee in New Mexico from yesterday's Supreme Court ruling with regards to the Voting Rights Act of 1965?
For those who don't know, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 had several, and I'm being told to slow down. So Catherine talks very fast about elections, so I apologize. So the Voting Rights of 1965 has some really important aspects, but the one that was struck down yesterday was Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which essentially allowed us to say that districts were being discriminatory. It used to be that we could say the impact on a group of people is now based on racial lines. So essentially, African American districts in the South, we saw after post-Reconstruction that there was gerrymandering of those districts to not allow people who are African American to vote. And there's two aspects of what we normally see when you are trying to gerrymander districts. You're either cracking, which is you're pushing people apart, or packing, putting them all in one district. We saw some of this in San Juan County when they were essentially packing Native Americans into one county commission district instead of two, and they went to court and they won. It's going to be harder for us that we will be able to, within our own sort of sense of fair elections and having equality in our own state, to be able to have districts that are fair. But as we move forward, it's going to be much more difficult for us to contest congressional districts or to go to the Supreme Court, because now we can't use the idea that there's disparate outcomes. We have to show racial intent, and that's actually a very hard standard to meet. So we've essentially narrowed our ability to contest what we see as unfair gerrymandering along racial lines. So, we are very concerned to see that this Supreme Court is not taking the idea of disparate impact or disparate outcomes seriously. And this is along the narrative of a very conservative Supreme Court and upending what we have seen as 60 years of voting rights. So, I'm hoping that as a Democrat, of course, that we will be able to change that narrative and see more reasonableness from the Supreme Court and go back to the idea that it is very, very hard to prove racial intent, but it is easy to see the impact on people.
Thank you. And
Could you
let me
repeat
know
it?
if you need me to repeat questions.
Please,
Okay, sure.
thank you.
What challenges do you foresee in New Mexico from yesterday's Supreme Court ruling with regards to the Voting Rights Act of 1965?
Well, there's never been a time when I've been grateful to be a New Mexican more than now. The idea of the federal overreach in elections continues to loom over us. But what I also think is we have some of the most progressive pro-voter policies in our country. And it really does underscore this fight to keep the federalization out and to continue to be able to run our own elections, as well as pass legislation that will continue to support voters and turnout. My opponent is correct in that you have to prove intent, where there's always plausible deniability on the other end, right? We didn't know, it doesn't make sense to me. It's also implying that there's no racial disparities in this country anymore, which is just outrageous, because if you look at the outcomes in our country, that in itself tells you that we still got a problem, right? And so I think it really underscores on some level the two-party system as well, because they will remain strong and supporting candidates in their respective districts. But if you're not very concerned after yesterday's ruling, you should be. Because this is, when I say hovering, and I talk about this often, we are in a street fight for our democracy. I am not exaggerating. I believe I am the street fighter to lead New Mexico's elections because I have been doing it for 8 years. This is not about, well, when that happens, I'll do this. This is about, I've been doing it since 5 days walking into the 2018 election where I had to battle election deniers from day one. And so it's not, again, easy, but it is always worth it. And I'm determined to continue to do that and to protect New Mexico elections from all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Thank you very much. I want to remind our audience, some of you may have not heard earlier, but we can't ask questions that are directed at just one candidate. So any question you hand out to the aisle, please make sure that both candidates will be able to answer that. Thank you. And you can ask the candidates any question directly after this forum. They'll be here for a few minutes for you. So we're going to move on to our second question. We have an independent redistricting commission here in New Mexico. Do you think that system is working well to give equal access to voters of all political persuasions? This is a 1-minute question, and we're going to start with you, Ms. Clark.
I'm not going to switch off. Okay.
Nope, we're just going to go back and forth.
Sure. Okay. So you may know that earlier this year, the redistricting commission, several of our legislators actually quit. They resigned because their feeling was if we move to a fair districting commission, which is sort of a neutral, objective version of fair redistricting, then all of the redistricting fights we're seeing across the country essentially makes Democrats fighting with their arm behind their back, and we don't believe that in New Mexico. But the problem is that it's very hard to give up power. So my thought around fair districting is that we actually enter a fair districting compact, similar to the compact we did for the electoral vote. So essentially we reach to about an 80%, where 80% of states agree to be fair districted, and once that happens, it automatically turns on the trigger, so we would all be under a fair districting. That is the easiest way to transition power. I run elections, I know it's hard for people to give up power, but that is the rational way of making sure we have fair districts. Also, but also not giving up and fighting with an arm behind our back while we're seeing all this Republican gerrymandering going on throughout the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Askin.
Could you repeat it?
Yes. We have an independent redistricting commission here in New Mexico. Do you think that system is working well to give equal access to voters of all political persuasions?
So I guess the question is really based on access, and we do have basically great access in New Mexico. It's one of the reasons we continue to be ranked in the top 10 of in election administration, because we do everything we can to maximize access. I will tell you, my predecessor as the county clerk, he was actually a commissioner, and he voted for a redistricting that actually removed him from power. He knew he was not going to get elected based on the maps, but he chose to basically confirm them because he thought it was the right thing to do on the side of voters. What I will say is I'm surprised it is so openly discussed to basically maintain your power and your seat and basically rearrange the maps that way. It was very surprising to me as clerk. I think there's an inherent problem with that. And I would hope that we would get more representation from all sides of our state, all political affiliations, and that, you know, I'm not opposed to basically another level and another layer of accountability when it comes to that specific governing board. So.
All right, thank you. And I meant to switch back and forth who started questions. Thank you, Catherine, for reminding me. So we're going to stick with you, Ms. Askin, for this one. This is going to be a 2-minute question.
Okay.
What are the challenges to engaging voters here, and what specific measurable strategies would you implement to increase voter turnout in New Mexico?
You know, I often say that I love Santa Fe. Santa Fe and the people here have been very good to me. But Santa Fe is a snapshot of Santa Fe. It is not a snapshot of New Mexico. And I think it's important that we recognize that. And one of the great things about traveling all over New Mexico is getting different perspectives, different backgrounds, all demographics, as well as different party affiliations. You know, so I run elections in a borderland community. I run elections with the idea that somehow something is amiss because I must be registering undocumented people to register to vote. And so having said that, we engage voters in all of the ways. We don't pick one. And we need to go to the people who are closest to the pain and the problem for the solution. We have a podcast, a YouTube page. We do outreach and have done outreach since 2018 to every single school system. We have 3 districts in our county. A senior does not leave our public schools in my county without myself or somebody from my office having talked to them about the importance of voting. We need to increase our rural access. We need to continue to really focus on absentee and mail-in. It's becoming easier, and we also have the permanent absentee, which is awesome, hopefully, for turnout. I can already see the trend in Doña Ana County increasing because of the permanent absentee list. People who would not have normally voted in an election have it on their kitchen table. And so they might as well just vote and send it in, and it increased our turnout for our local election in a very big way. So I would say the proven ideas are out there. We need the funding to be able to implement that in New Mexico, and we need, I think, a system that is uniform across our state.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Clark.
Thank you. So similar to my opponent, we do a high school Democracy 101 program for which we won several national awards. The idea is that we don't want anyone to graduate from high school in Santa Fe County unless they have actually practiced on a tabulator. Part of what we do when we practice on a tabulator is make sure we go through a pre-bunking program, because we're very concerned about mis and disinformation, and that realistic, tangible experience of understanding how the tabulator works can actually really impact how a young person will go through life. We also know that when young people vote 3 times, we know that they'll become lifelong voters, and our goal as the county clerk's office is to be that one time they've practiced voting so that we can knock off one of the 3 experiences. We also do something called kids voting. It'll be happening again during this election, where we actually have a tabulator at some of our early voting sites so families can make it a family experience. Almost every person I know who is a regular voter went with their grandmother, went with their parents, and learned how to vote. And that experience of going with your family is so important to making it a family value. And I'm so proud of Santa Fe County that we have very high turnout across many different demographics, because we believe so strongly in being part of our community and making sure that our voices are heard. Part of what we do in Santa Fe County also is we do advisory boards, right? We reach out to communities that are underrepresented when it comes to voting, and we've put together advisory boards so that they can give us direction on how to increase turnout. One of the things I'd really like to do is improve the website. What we know is that 80% of people who are going to a website go on their cell phone. And the current Secretary of State's website is not what we call responsive design, which means it's hard to navigate. And something very simple we can do is make sure there's responsive design and make sure there's an app, because young people want everything to be on an app. And it's how we're going to also remind them how to vote. If they download the app, we'll push out notifications to make sure they've made a voting plan. Those are just some of the things I'm really interested in doing, because of course I care dearly about turnout, and I want to make sure those programs are expanded to the rest of New Mexico. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we'll stay with you, Ms. Clark, for the next one. I'm trying to get back on here. Did you support Senate Bill 264, and why or why not? And this is a 1-minute question.
Sure. So this is because I know this comes up because I'm the legislative chair for the county clerks, and I'm also represent Santa Fe County. So at Santa Fe County, the first initial vote, we actually abstained because I did not think the bill went far enough. One of the things the bill does is actually makes a boundary around polling sites and a boundary around ballot boxes, and I actually don't think that goes far enough. My letter to ICE said it should be mere presence, right? So my feeling is ICE is just going to sit right outside of the boundary and intimidate voters. So I wanted to make sure the bill went further. Unfortunately, the county clerks did not, and so there was actually a second vote at the New Mexico counties where my opponent voted against it, and that was the bill. That was the move for the counties to essentially decide whether they were going to lobby against the bill. So if we're being technical, I'm the only person in the room who didn't oppose the bill on a vote, but I certainly support the bill as it finished. After I talked to my legislators, they said there's just not enough time to change the bill. It's moving fast. So of course, Santa Fe County by itself supported it, but unfortunately the majority of the clerks did not.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yes, it is. I did support Senate Bill 264, and the reference to the New Mexico counties vote. In fact, I researched it this week because I didn't remember exactly. We had meetings every single week of the session. I didn't remember specifically the minutia of that meeting. And the notes reflect what I believe is that, and what I've shown in my votes is that it didn't go far enough, and that I opposed it in its current iteration with amendments. Now, those amendments were implemented, a few of them, and so moving forward, I supported the bill. I am the only person that was publicly basically called out by Senate Republican leadership for being the only one to support it, as well as it's well documented in the public, in the press, that I was the only one to support it. I live in the borderlands. This is not just something in theory. This is actually, I've seen it. I've heard the fear, and I felt the fear from my community and even some of my family members.
Thank you. And we'll be staying with you for this next question. And this comes just because the audience may not know about this, and I certainly don't. Comes from the Secretary of State's website, the state website. Tell us about the Safe at Home program and its effectiveness. This is a 1-minute question.
This is a really great program. For those who are in fear for their life, for those who have been victims of domestic violence or the threat of violence, they are able to vote without any identifying information being made public. So these requests that we get for data, these individuals are specifically protected. They are referenced via numbers, and we don't even know specifically who they are. I think it is one of the many ways that New Mexico protects New Mexican voters, and another thing that we should be proud of, and every New Mexican should know, that we make extra efforts to connect with those most vulnerable to make sure they have access to the ballot.
Thank you.
Yes, as Dr. Lopez-Askin said, the Safe at Home program is great. It protects people who've been stalked. It protects people who are afraid for their lives. One of the challenges we see is that it's an absentee-only program. So essentially, if someone loses their absentee ballot who isn't part of the Safe at Home program, they're essentially locked out from being able to vote unless they, violate their privacy, go to a polling site, use same-day registration, and then flip on their ID. The problem with that is then, of course, their name appears on the absentee voter roster or the data. So something I'd really like to change is to make sure the Safe at Home program actually has an in-person element where you would go to a polling site, you give them, the poll worker, your unique ID, so that way you don't have to identify yourself, as sort of an emergency measure in case you couldn't get an absentee ballot or your absentee ballot got lost, so that you still could vote, because we are seeing many, because of the challenges with the mail lately, unfortunately, we are seeing several Safe at Home voters having been denied the right to vote because they never got that absentee ballot. So there is a need to modernize, but I think it is a great program.
Thank you. And we'll stay with you for this next question, Ms. Clark. This is a 1-minute question. If the Save America Act gets signed, what will you do to protect New Mexico's voters from having to show birth certificates, real IDs, or passports at the polls? We've been watching this legislation very closely. I'm on the election subcommittee for the National Association of Counties, and I was in DC about 3 or 4 weeks ago to talk to Republicans, because Democrats are 100% against the SAVE Act. So what we heard from the Republicans who are against it is they very much see this as executive overreach, and that's the thing we have to keep on saying over and over again, executive overreach. So the bill is dead. If the bill were to pass, it essentially would take online voting overnight, absentee voting overnight, and yes, it would require ID. There really wouldn't be anything to do because it is federal law that is taking effect overnight. What we would have to do is fight it like hell in court, and I know that our AG, Raul Torres, is up to the task. I think both of us would be up for the task for fighting this. Right now the bill is dead. We're going to keep fighting to make sure it's killed. But I can assure you, we are doing everything we can to protect the voters of New Mexico from this bill passing. Thank you. Thank you.
So I was fortunate to be appointed to the Election Assistance Commission. They are the only federal arm of elections that oversee and support elections in our country. And I was appointed by our Secretary of State as the representative from New Mexico. And it has been so fascinating to meet with like-minded people across the country who, regardless of their party affiliation, are scared of the SAVE Act. I had the opportunity to speak to Senator Lujan last weekend, and he basically said they will continue to fight like hell to make sure it doesn't crop up again and again. But I think it underscores the idea that we are on some level at the mercy of SCOTUS, and moving forward, we have to continue to do everything we can to support New Mexico elections, but also we can do things in preparation if it were. Working with other government organizations, discounting or making access to birth certificates, et cetera, free. I mean, there's ways, sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, we got a
No, you're
semicolon
good. I'm
slipped
sorry,
in there.
my apologies.
Oh, my apologies. There was a semicolon joke. We're gonna stay with you for this next question. It'll be a 1-minute question.
Okay.
We've heard a lot about non-citizens registering to vote. How can we be sure that registered voters are in fact citizens?
You know, this is a joke, but it's really not that funny. I always say, like, there's not this gate that undocumented folks are behind, and they're just waiting to commit a 4th-degree felony. They just can't wait to get that vote in that one vote so they can commit a felony. We have to talk about that narrative and the fear and the villainization of people of color. We have to put that front and center. New Mexico has voter ID. I think we need to say that again and again. New Mexico has voter ID. You cannot register to vote unless you have proved who you are. And there are 3 ways when you get to the ballot box that you affirm it via your ID, your voter identification card, or an affirmation of information known only to yourself. But the most important layer, if we're talking personal responsibility, is that signature under a 4th-degree felony, that you are them, you are the person voting, and we need to highlight that continually. We also need to band together, and I think the clerks would support any enforcement of that. Fraud is so minimal that it doesn't even blip on the radar of data. If you look into it, there are so few proven cases. So I always say to people, report it. It should be investigated. I'm more against voter fraud than anybody because I'm in charge of the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Clark.
So it is true that New Mexico has voter ID. I think a lot of people confuse voter ID and photo ID and what we saw, which was documentary proof of citizenship, with the SAVE Act. I think it's easier to get into a nuclear facility than it is to prove you can register to vote with the SAVE Act. That's how difficult it is. That being said, there's very little motivation, as my opponent said, for people who are undocumented to attempt to commit a 4th-degree felony. But also there are a lot of checks and balances. People who go to MVD or DMV, their social security number is checked against the database, right? And we make sure that people can't register to vote who are non-citizens. But actually the Republican Party proved to us this last year that the issue of people who are non-citizens voting is very, very minor. They ran their entire database through the so-called SAVE database, and they found out of 11 million people, 30 people, and of those, maybe 2 voted because they thought they were supposed to, because an election official sent them this official-looking document. So this is really a problem, a solution in search of a problem. This is not a problem, and the fact that we are considering disenfranchising so many people for something that is not a non-issue is an issue. Sorry, we're all passionate about this issue.
Absolutely. I'm trying not to be really mean here.
You're doing
I'm
great. You're doing great.
All right, so we're going to stick with you, Catherine, for this next question. Is New Mexico sharing voter rolls with the federal government and/or ERIC, which is the state sharing database? How do you see those projects affecting your office in the future?
So ERIC is a consortium of states who have agreed to share their data between each other, because what states have found is that for people who've passed away, they get ill, they maybe move in with relatives, they pass away somewhere else, and then we never hear about it. Having to take yourself out of the voter roll is a voter-directed action, so we often don't hear about it. We get national change of address, but what's nice about ERIC is it puts it all into one database. We never see the other people's database. It just checks it on the back end, and then we get notices saying to us, this person's probably has moved, and then we send them an invite to unsubscribe themselves, essentially, from the voter registration file, or if they're deceased, we remove them. It is not what we're talking about in terms of the federal government. This administration is attempting to create a nationalized voter database called the SAVE database. And they cannot guarantee the Secretary of State that they are not going to use it against, to share it with different organizations, to share it outside. There's discussion of maybe it being shared with Plantier and some of the big AI databases. So we're very concerned about the sanctity of our voter file. What is really important, what the founding fathers recognized as really important, is that elections are run locally and by our states. It's not the position of the executive to be able to dictate elections, because that is giving them far too much power. So as local and state election officials, we are very much against sharing our data with a federal government that can't really be honest about what they're planning to do with it. And so far we've given them what is publicly available, but we are not going to be giving driver's licenses, and we're not going to be giving them social security numbers and personally identifying information, because they can't tell us they won't be doing it. They will not keep it safe, and not necessarily can't tell us what they're going to be doing with it. So I think we're all in unison on that, that these two things, Eric and the federal government, are very different things with very different purposes.
Thank you.
So Eric, I believe it stands for the Electronic Registration Information Center. Basically, if you move to Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania participates in it. It alerts New Mexico, hey, we have a new voter over here. And it actually is super helpful in removing people from our voter roll. Now, because it has been frowned on by the current administration, the Trump administration, many states have removed themselves, so it has become less effective overall. As far as these exhaustive lists, I don't disagree with my opponent on her points. I think those are generally very pro-voter, perspectives. What I will say is that the good news is a lot of these executive orders, if not all of them, are unconstitutional. The challenge within that is we, again, are looking at the the support from our court systems to support what we are doing. I support any and all fight to give any kind of protected voter information to any entity that we have no idea what it's going to be used for. It is something that is based in law. We protect your data. When we're asked anything about a specific voter, we have to black it out. We should continue that absolutely undeterred and fight it everywhere, every step of the way as far as it will go. I did speak with Attorney General Torres, and he is willing to take on that fight. He is front and center of fighting the Trump administration anyway. And so as Secretary of State, I would support that and standing firm in protecting my fellow New Mexicans' protected information.
Thank you very much. And we'll stay with you for this next
Okay.
question. This will be a 1-minute question. You would be second in line to succeed the governor should you need to step in if the governor and lieutenant governor are incapacitated. How are you prepared for that?
I have a long career in public service. I have served my state and local community in many different ways. And the last 8 years, I have been, on some level, battling every day to protect our way of life and what we do in terms of access to the ballot box and how we elect leaders. So I also am not deterred by that idea of leadership. I have proven it since I started my career 25 years ago. The challenges have been deep when you work with young people who are suicidal, when you're working with large systems like CYFD, when you're working in hospitals or schools. You must build relationships. Everything is relationship based. When you think about politics, I think as it's synonymous with relationship building. And so that would be the first thing that I would focus on, is building strong relationships and continuing that. And then, God forbid, frankly, that any kind of permanent, governorship would, but also they would help and support what I would do. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Hopefully, if we're talking about incapacitation, it would not be something permanent. But I think I bring 25 years of public service. I have an MBA, have been in charge of, essentially, I used to do consulting work and go in and deal with crises when organizations were having challenges and try to stand up organization and make sure that operations were running smoothly. I've had up to 400 employees. I've been the leader of a union. I've been the leader of large nonprofits. And I think really what's exemplary is that when the fires were starting in Mora and San Miguel County, it was me who actually called the Secretary of State to say, hey, we need to do something. This fire is coming and an election is coming too. And we got together with 25 different agencies, and I was the one leading the phone call to make sure that we had voting in Mora County. So I think I feel incredibly prepared. I would never want the job because of something terrible happening to our elected officials. But I think that it is a collaborative job. It's a job of showing leadership, and it's a job to make sure that that we keep New Mexico, the government running on behalf of New Mexicans. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll stay with you, Ms. Clark, for a second. This will be a 1-minute question. Would you be in favor of a full mail-in ballot system that other states have adopted?
I think 5 years ago, I might have said eventually yes, but I am very, very worried about the status of our postal mail. What we have seen since DeJoy took office is that they are consolidating distribution centers across the country, and we've actually seen plans that maybe go down to as few as 20, which means all of our ballots would leave New Mexico and go up to Denver, and we are very, very concerned with that idea. So while I think in ideal times when the Postal Service worked and we made sure it was fully funded and there was adequate tracking, because Trump's administration, DeJoy also took out all the sorting machines that had tracking for our ballots, right? So I've actually passed a resolution at the National Association of Counties asking that ballots not travel more than 30 miles unless there's a tracking in anticipation of this. But I think I would be in support if things were different. But since we are living our realities and we know that already Navajo Nation and some rural counties already find the mail challenging, let's not rely on a system that has built-in inequity right now. Let's try to make the mail more equitable and then move to all mail. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Lopez.
Could you repeat it just to make sure I covered?
Sure. Would you be in favor of a full mail-in ballot system like some of the other states have adopted?
So I would not. I would really be interested in looking at what Colorado does. Oregon has a full mail, and their turnout is exceptional, anywhere between 82%, 84% some years. And so we want more turnout. We know the more people participate, the better we are as a community, the more representation we have, the more diverse leadership we have. But I also know that when I administered the first ranked choice voting election in Las Cruces, that people like to vote in person and they like to vote how they've always voted. And we can say, oh, this is better, we want this is why you should do it. But at the end of the day, I think we need to meet voters where they are. And I would love a hybrid system like Colorado, which increases turnout, but maybe have like large vote centers where people can go in person and submit their vote via literally the ballot box.
Thank you. Okay, so this is going to be a quickie. We'll stay with you.
Okay.
30 seconds.
Wow.
Do you have and will you accept out-of-state contributions? Why and why not? 30 seconds, go.
Yes. I am from Southern New Mexico. I am running to be Secretary of State. At the end of the day, there's this implication that you're compromised if people take that next step, that you're compromised if you accept money. The Secretary of State's office has very specific roles, and so the idea of supporting democracy, my best friend lives in Texas. She often donates to me, and so there's nothing nefarious there. I would also say that hold me accountable every step of the way. If there is something that you believe could be influenced by, call me out on it, but the answer is
I
yes.
want to see those for the last question. Thank you. Yes, please.
Yes, I have a lot of friends and families and supporters who live out of state, so yes. Thank you.
Well, that was easy. All right, we're going to stay with you, and this is a 1-minute question. What are some changes you would make as Secretary of State?
How long do I have?
1 minute.
Only 1 minute. Okay, so I think for me, it's defending access to the ballot is what I'm running on. I'm running
All right,
on
let's do that
making
last one.
defending access to the ballot And I really want to make sure that we're modernizing the office. I want to make sure we're democratizing the office. I think, again, the website we really need to change. I want to make sure that we expand our Democracy 101 program so that every kid in New Mexico uses a tabulator and can graduate having used a tabulator. I want to make sure that we actually update our voter registration system. A lot of our challenges that we see is because of the infrastructure around elections. You know, Maggie Tuolis-Oliver did a wonderful job, an amazing job, of seeing the vision of expanding access to the ballot with same-day registration, automatic voter registration, more drop boxes, right? And all of that is running on an infrastructure that is about 15 years old. So I'd like to make sure, you know, while not sexy, it is the way of making sure that we are, you know, stabilizing elections. I'd like to make sure we get dark money out of our elections, right? We have campaign finance limits on school board elections, and making sure that we report our large contributions, no matter who's influencing the roundhouse. And I want to make sure, again, that we're democratizing that, you know, questions on the ballot are actually in layman's terms, not just in legalese that the legislature put on the ballot. These are all the things I want to do. Sorry. It's not enough, I promise.
Sure, so I'm going to start with something very boring called the budget. The Secretary of State's office had about 22% of their budget cut from them. They basically needed 14 million. They got 9. We were able to get up to, I think, 12.6. You can't do anything without a budget. So that would be number one. The reporting systems online need to be revamped. The business side of the office that does oversee registrations as well as campaign finance, all of that needs to be revamped. So an RFP has gone out, and the next Secretary of State will be the one that implements it. And so I've had to implement large programs over my career, and I think that is something that actually we would need input from those who use the systems. I also would love to start a voter education task force to figure out in these rural communities, in the larger areas, what we can do to encourage voter participation. And again, people closest to the problem are the ones that have the solutions. And I think that we would also need to get fully staffed, because there's a sad state when a Secretary of State staff member cannot travel to go support county clerks because there's no hotel money. So thanks.
Thank you. That's very good. This will be our last question.
No.
And you all have covered some of this before. It'll be 2 minutes, but you can go 2.5 if you want. I won't cut you off this time. This seems to be a big question. And we're going to start with you, Ms. Askin. How do you plan to address what seems to be a pervasive lack of trust in the voting process nationally as well as here in New Mexico? 2 minutes.
When I walked in 5 days after being appointed to the 2018 election of Congressional District 2 race, Xochitl Esmal and Yvette Harrell, day one was election denialism, and they started in Doña Ana County in 2018. I have dealt with election deniers and those who don't have faith in the system since 2018. My initial response was to let them say what they want to say and move along. But what I discovered is I was losing opportunities to combat those narratives and give good information. So when you come to a commission meeting and you accuse, me specifically of, the fix is in, things like hand-marked paper ballots. Let's continue to advocate for good policy. We can recreate one race or an entire election. We have to have hand-marked paper ballots. We have to have audits along the way. We do open up the process to the public, and we have to really, really do everything we can on the county level to maximize that information going out to these communities. It can't just come from the Secretary of State's office. It has to be a collaborative effort throughout the state, and I think we can do it, and part of that is going into the schools. Senator Bill Soes, who chairs the Education Committee, and I have talked extensively about perhaps making some type of curriculum or voter education that actually has facts about how the system works embedded in as a graduation requirement. And that is something I think that every young person could benefit from, to understand how well we run elections in New Mexico. Again, we are ranked in the top 10 of election administration. There's not many lists that we are top 10 on. Election administration is one of them, because we have implemented all of the best practice. We just need to talk about it more, and all of those layers of accountability. Part of it is engaging the public and working for us. We cannot run elections without our community. And so those folks believe in elections because they run them. And so I think those are the ways that we can navigate that.
Thank you very much. And now Ms. Clark.
Thank you for the question. So there was some discussion earlier about budget, and I do think that one of the keys that the Secretary of State will have to do is get more budget, and I think she'll need to get more budget for PSAs and voter information and voter outreach. I think there's so much mis and disinformation out there, especially in places that we are not there all the time. For instance, like on gaming, there's a lot of young men who are just getting really negative messaging around voting, and we're gonna have to figure out how to be in those spaces. I think, as I said before, we pre-bunk information. So we have a voter information and voter democracy 101 program for young people because we're working very hard on pre-bunking mis and disinformation at the local level. And I'd like to make sure that goes statewide with a grant for all county clerks. We also have a voter information course on our website where a lot of people take that and then end up being interested in elections and volunteer to be our poll workers. And I'd like to run high trust elections. That's elections that post all the results on election night, that have a very transparent process like we have, which is a turnout tracker on our website so people can see voters checking in. We should be doing that statewide. I'd like to post more things online. For instance, the voting machine certificates, where right now we're certifying our election machines for this election. Those certificates should go online. The tabulator tape should go online. We do a great job and our ballots should go online after we're done with the certification process, right? We do an amazing job. We're looked to for our auditing process, but we can always do more to be more transparent. And finally, I think that there's a lot of things we can do to reduce error. There's a lot of stuff in the statute that's very contradictory, a lot of administrative rules that don't make sense anymore, right? And we want to make sure that we're part of that modernization is making sure that we're getting rid of statutes that no longer apply, things that talk about paper, things that we don't do that are now automated, and make sure we're streamlining so that way we all have uniformity in our rules, so make sure we're all not making mistakes or making sure that everyone can trust the election because we're all being judged by the same stick. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to move to the closing statements, but before we do, let's just all take a deep breath. My gosh, we have been through a lot here tonight. Amazing information. And I want to thank our candidates and give them a chance to take a drink of water, whatever they've got there. We're going to do these 1-minute closing statements in reverse order, so we'll be starting with you, Ms. Lopez-Askin, and then Catherine Clark.
So first of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters. In Doña Ana County, I will tell you, you have been invaluable in getting voters information, and the idea that I'm able to refer them to a non-biased, apolitical source has been a godsend. So I really appreciate all of your efforts. It's very worth it for voters. I have spent the last year navigating all over New Mexico and speaking to people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, different political parties. But the thing that we continue to have in common was our concern for our country and our democracy and where it is going. By any measure, I am the most experienced and qualified candidate to be Secretary of State. And I will tell you, it has been an honor for me to run. I have earned the endorsement of Senator Heinrich, Congressman Vasquez, Xochitl Esmal, former Cabinet Secretary and former candidate for Secretary of State, Sonia Smith, is all in and is supporting me. Planned Parenthood, Sierra Club, the Firefighters Association. Please head to Amanda for NM and you can see all of my endorsements. That does not include the dozens of elected leaders across our state that are vouching for me. So my name is Dr. Amanda Lopez-Askin, and I am running for Secretary of State, and I hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
How long do we have? I'm so sorry.
We have 1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. Thank you so much for having me. And again, we really do appreciate the Vote 411 guide. As your Santa Fe County Clerk, I come to this office with 25 years in the election space. I used to run campaigns, and I saw firsthand what it meant when an election official put their thumb on the scale, right? It was either through implementation or, unintentional bias, but essentially, I went to Berkeley, I ran campaigns, and I saw what happened when a county clerk just really didn't believe that young people were going to vote, so they didn't register all those voters. And then they didn't think that those voters were going to vote, and so they didn't provide as many provisional ballots as they needed. And that clerk impacted who won. That should never be. The election official needs to be the one who makes sure that we uphold the free and fairness of elections. And we're seeing an executive right now who's attempting to take our right to vote, and someone who is attempting to wrestle from us our ability to have one voice, one vote. I want to be the person who is your champion, both here and in DC, making sure we're fighting for the right to vote. I'm Catherine Clark. I'm your Santa Fe County Clerk, and I want to make sure we uphold what we hold dear, which is our democracy that is so under threat right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's going to conclude. All right, we can clap now. I'm going to ask you to clap again in a minute. That concludes this evening's Santa Fe County Candidate Forum. I want to thank Bill Church again, who's editor of the Santa Fe New Mexican, and Patrick Dorsey, publisher, and Henry Lopez of Lopez Integrated Technologies for broadcasting, along with Matt Dahlside up here in the front row from the New Mexican. This program will be available for future streaming on the New Mexican's website, santafenewmexican.com, and also on the League's website, lwvsfc.org. And I want to thank the Food Depot again for everything they've done free of charge to the League. Yes. For more information on the election and the candidates, the League's voter guide will be available tomorrow at lwvsfc.org and vote111.org, and it'll also be published in the paper. And we want to remind you that if your questions weren't asked, you're welcome to stay after the forum to talk to the candidates. Or if you're watching online and you have questions, send them a question. You can check out their contact information at vote411.org. And be sure to make your voice heard in this election by voting early or absentee or at the polls on June 2nd. And please join me again in thanking the candidates for their participation.
Thank you guys.
Very good job.